Hi, everyone, and welcome to our next session as a part of the Copilot Control System Digital Deep Dive. I'm F.A. Bugo, your host for today, and a Senior Product Marketing Manager on the Copilot Control System team. During the session, we are going to talk about understanding web search controls in Microsoft 365 Copilot. Web search in Copilot enhances response quality with real-time data. At the same time, it raises important questions around governance. In this session, we're going to explore how Microsoft empowers organizations to tailor web search behavior to meet their unique business needs. We're going to get into the 4 layers of protection: admin controls, user protections, query safeguards, and contractual commitments. With that, I want to hand it over to our 2 speakers, top experts on web search and Copilot: Alex Posen, who leads the Copilot Control System product marketing team and security and governance for Copilot, and Suhail Parekh, product lead in Copilot, driving web search handling and control improvements. Over to you, Alex and Suhail.
Thank you so much, F.A. Welcome to our session about Copilot Web Search. My name is Alex Posen. As F.A. mentioned, I lead the Copilot Control System product marketing team, and with us we have Suhail Parekh. Suhail, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
No, thanks, Alex. Yes, I'm a principal product lead at Copilot, and I work closely with Alex on getting controls and improving web search handling for our users.
Thanks, Suhail. So if you're interested in understanding the power of web search and how to harness that power in your organization, you have come to the right place. Now let's kick off with the first slide in our presentation. As we've mentioned before, we'll go through the controls, how you can apply them, and how you can use them for your organization. Now, this session is part of our Copilot Control System 2-day digital event. And this particular topic sits within the security and governance pillar. So as we go to the next slide, what I want you to understand is 3 things. We've got a lot of content for you today. We're going to go through it fairly quickly. We'll cover the fundamentals, but there are 3 really important ideas that I think will be helpful to get out of this presentation. First and foremost, Copilot is better with fresh data from the web. Copilot can handle a ton of data, can synthesize it, but every LLM model has a ship-on date and has gaps in its knowledge. When you apply web search, you improve the quality of responses with latest data. The second point is that Copilot Web Search is more private and secure than traditional web search, and we'll talk about why that's true. And lastly, is the fact that you are in control of how you use web search within your organization. These are the controls and the commitments that we offer to you, and we'll talk all about that. And with that, let's talk about what's on the agenda for today. So there's 6 key sections. First, we'll talk about what does web search do in Copilot, and what does the user experience look like. So we'll set the foundation. You'll understand what that looks like. The next couple of topics really get into the fundamentals of how web search works, the difference between prompts and responses in web search queries, as well as how Copilot uses those queries when it is grounding. In the last 2 topics, we'll talk about the protections and controls for web queries in Copilot, as well as the recent and upcoming improvements we have made to give you more control and visibility. And with that, I'd like to hand it off to Suhail, who will be covering the first 2 topics.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Alex. So as we move on to this slide, let's walk through a simple example that shows how web search enhances Copilot's responses. Over here, as you can see, we asked Copilot, what's Seattle's newest professional hockey team? And with web search enabled, Copilot returned the correct, current answer, which is PWHL Seattle, part of the Professional Women Hockey League. It also included details like player signings and the team's launch timeline, because it could pull real-time data from Bing. Now moving along, let's take a look at the same example, but where web search was turned off. Here Copilot responds with, Seattle Kraken, an NHL team from 2021. That answer is clearly outdated and inaccurate, because over here in this instance, Copilot had to rely only on its training data, which has a knowledge cutoff and does not reflect the latest developments. Now, imagine if this wasn't about a hockey team, but about your company's data. What if an analyst asks Copilot for a summary of your latest, quarterly earnings, or a sales lead asks for the most recent, customer win stories? If web search is off, Copilot might return outdated or incomplete information. That's not just a missed opportunity, it's a risk to decision making, credibility and user trust. Moving on, I just want to quickly highlight one important feature over here. When web search is enabled, building on the example which we had in the previous slides, you can see that Copilot not only grounds its responses in real-time web data, it also shows you exactly what web query was sent to Bing and where that information came from. You can see here how the citation is linked directly to the source, and the actual query that Copilot used is visible too. This gives our users full transparency into how the response was built, which helps in building that trust. Now, one question which we get a lot is if the entire prompt which the user puts was passed to Bing as a query. And to help answer that, I'm going to pass it over to Alex, who can help explain that distinction better.
Thanks, Sohail. Let's go on to the next slide. All right. So this is a helpful diagram to understand how web search works behind the scenes. And let me walk you through it. When you type something into Copilot, you create a prompt. Copilot will look at that prompt, and it will generate a web search query that will help cover the gap in knowledge that we talked about. The web search query is typically just a few short words. The identifiers, such as user identifier and tenant identifier, are removed when we create that query. Then that query is securely sent to the Bing search service. Bing will identify relevant data from the web and securely send that data back, so that relevant web data can then be incorporated into the response. As you can see, the prompt and response remain within the M365 service boundary. It is the query itself that leaves and goes out to Bing. And this flow is important to understand when you're trying to answer different questions about how web search operates. So with understanding of this flow, let's go on to the next slide. Here's an example of what a prompt, a query, and a response could look like. Let's imagine that we're doing a little bit of M&A activity or M&A work in our organization, and we're asking Copilot that we'd like help with a summary report on financial information about a fictitious company called Paprikam. So we type in this long prompt, which is a couple sentences long. What Copilot will do is it will generate a short query. It includes two phrases, Paprikam strategy and Paprikam financials. Copilot does not share your intent in this case about why you're asking these questions with Bing. It simply shares a couple of words that are useful for enhancing the quality of the response. Then when the data comes back from Bing and from the web, it will incorporate that latest data into the response. Let's go on. So the questions you may be asking is, how is my data protected? What control do I have over how web search is used? The good news is you're always in control. Let's start at the top here, administrative controls. First, your administrators have the ability to determine who in your organization is able to use web search. We have a web search policy for that, so you can determine it by user or group. You can also control web search based on the work tab or the web tab in Copilot. So you have those abilities. And then, of course, you have the ability to audit what web queries are going out. And you can see those in the context of the prompt and response. Now, users themselves are also protected as part of this flow. M365 Copilot Work tab has a toggle that allows the user to turn web search on or off in case they want to keep the prompt separate and not create a query. There's also REI, responsible AI, built onto the prompt and response. And a lot of that comes even with the large language model itself. So certain terms or certain phrases or certain words will be rejected. You will not even get a response in those. And you can play around with those, but that's one of the levels of protection that's built in. And then there's the transparency built into the process itself. This allows the users to learn what kind of queries are created when users type in different prompts. Now, the queries themselves are also protected. So as we've mentioned before, it's typically just a short few words. Unless your prompt is really, really short as well, Copilot will try to really narrow it down to the most relevant information. The transmission is done securely, as we've mentioned before. and the user and tenant identifiers are removed. So that covers a lot of the controls, but there are also commitments that we make. And some of the important ones to call out here is that Microsoft has no rights to the query data other than needed to provide the services. We're not using the queries to improve Bing. They're not used for advertising profiles or tracking, not shared with advertisers or beyond Microsoft. We're not using query data to train AI foundation models. We really treat queries as customer confidential information. And for full language of the queries, those are posted in our product terms. So if you're interested in seeing those, you can see that full language as well. Now let's go on to the next slide. We've talked about the flow diagram of how web search works, and we've talked about the protections. What this does is it brings the two concepts together for you so you can understand where the protections overlay with the flow itself. As you can see, the admin controls apply to the entire tenant. The user protections work on the prompt and response, and all the way throughout. The query protections protect the query itself. And lastly, contractual commitments cover how data is handled in Bing search service. And with that, let's go on to the next slide. So one of the things I talked about at the beginning is that Copilot web search is more secure and private than traditional web search. This slide illustrates why that is true. As you can see, there are significant differences in terms of admin controls. There are also differences in user protection. And even on the query protection side, the user and tenant identifiers are removed from Copilot web search. And last but not least are the contractual commitments themselves. So this is one of the important things to understand is you can conduct search in traditional means as well. You just get more protection when you're using Copilot. And with that, let's go to the next one. I'm going to pass it over to Sahel to cover the first two items here, and then I'll jump right back in. Sahel, we're not getting your sound.
Are you folks able to hear me?
No, now we can.
All right, perfect. How is it a great system if we do not hit a snag? As I was saying that, we have been busy over the past, semester. We have been hearing customers' feedback on that first item. Our recommendation is to keep web search enabled, for your users. But we do understand, that there are instances in which, customers need more granularity in terms of support of who should get access to web search and to impact the rollout, right? And so to that effect, we shift this control for web search, which allows admins to set it out for the work and the web modes, and also to actually see if it should be opened up to a security group of users first. This has been very helpful for many of our customers who have a phased rollout plan of enabling web search. The second one is around user transparency. This goes back to that example which we spoke about initially, and we showed that along with the citations, we actually show the exact, web query or the exact keywords, from the user prompt, which was sent out to Bing, to get that web grounding done. So this pairs very nicely, with the third one, which Alex is going to talk about.
Web search control policy that allows you to govern who can use web search and user transparency. Let me pick up with admin transparency. It's the same idea. Users should be able to know what web search queries have been created so they can learn from it. And administrators need the ability to audit those queries. So that's something we've made available since Q4 of 2024, which is the ability to see the queries that have been emitted as part of web search, the ability to audit them, and use the tools we provide through Purview eDiscovery to see how they relate to prompts and responses. And this is one of the things that some customers want to use to understand how web search is used in their organization. Now, beyond transparency, you also want the ability to control. And that's where DLP for Copilot comes in. What DLP for Copilot allows you to do is when you have a file that has a sensitivity label on it, you can prevent Copilot from processing those files. And if those files are not able to be processed, they cannot be used to generate web search queries. So if you have a very sensitive file and you're concerned about how it's going to be processed by Copilot, or whether some of the contents of the file may be used for a web search query, you can prevent that by using labeling. Now let's go on to the next slide. We'll talk a little bit about future improvements as well. So we talked about what we've done recently, but we are continuing to innovate and enhance the controls that we provide to customers, as well as the user experience that also puts users into control and gives them more visibility about what's happening. So that's what we're going to cover next. First, let me talk about something that's going to make it much easier to audit the queries that are generated. So in the SPM for AI Activity Explorer, we are going to add some great enhancements in July. And what that will allow you to do is see a list of all your queries, or all of your interactions with Copilot, and identify which ones have a web query. There's a column that is marked as yes or no for web queries, so you can identify those easily. If you want to conduct an audit, that really simplifies your ability to do that. And then as we go on to the next page, can give you a little bit more detail about what that will look like. So once you identify a relevant interaction, what you're able to see is the web query text that went out. You're also going to see the prompt and response. So all of that information now about that interaction is in the context. And that's really helpful for you to be able to conduct the audits where you want to understand how the query was used, what prompt was involved, what was the response that was involved. So this is coming in July for DSPM for AI Activity Explorer. Let's go on to going to pass this to Suhail.
I can talk about this one, and hopefully folks can hear me this time. So this one is about, again, building on that transparency and that usability. Many users, we've heard some DSATs, from our end users, that they were not aware that web search was turned off. And so to improve that transparency and usability, when web search is turned off in Microsoft 365 Copilot, either by policy or configuration, users are now going to be proactively notified. We are going to enhance the notification and the messaging which we show, which will help avoid confusion for users. This message will clearly inform them, when web search is off, and provide a direct path, to a learn more, or to a link, through which they can enable it back on. That's what we have, I think, for the slides. And I think we are now open for questions.
That's right. We'll go to Q&A now.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Alex and Sahel. Appreciate the insights into Copilot web search controls. Really insightful. Going to the questions from our audience. First one we have here, we're going to go with, how do I control who in my organization can use web search?
Suhail, do you want to cover the policy control for that?
Sure. Yeah, I think this is the one which we spoke about in that slide about the features which we shipped. There is a cloud policy which can be configured. We ship this based on feedback from admins. Through that cloud policy, admins can determine, right, like how they want to roll out, web search. They can open it up. They can enable web search across both the web and the work tabs, as we have in Microsoft 365 Copilot and Copilot Chat, or they can choose to enable, in work and disable. Enable in web tab and disable in work tab. We also give them a way, through which they can control the rollout, to a security group, or to security groups, or to individual users. If they want to have a phased rollout, we have seen some customers want to open it up to certain LOBs inside their organizations first, and that's a great way to do it.
Awesome. Thank you for that insight. Next question, and a really important one. Does Microsoft use query data to improve performance of Bing or train AI models?
Thanks, Stephanie. The simple answer is no, we do not.
Good.
And it's a proud answer. It's a proud answer, right? Like which we established. I think Alex mentioned about the contractual. commitments which we got added to product terms, which have been instrumental. And I think they're really landing with our customers.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate the simple answer, Alex. No, simply put. And we have one more question here from the audience. Can I prevent sensitive files from being referenced by Copilot when I'm using web search?
Yes, you can. And that relies on DLP for Copilot feature that I talked about earlier. So once you have a file labeled, you can prevent Copilot from processing those files, which also means that no query will be generated because Copilot will simply refuse to respond about the file. That does require the file to be labeled first.
Right. Awesome. Thank you, Alex. And with that, that's our last question. So we're going to wrap up this session. Alex and Sahel, thank you for your time today, for your insights into how to manage web search and Copilot and the benefits that web search brings to all the users who are leveraging this powerful technology. Thank you again. And for all those watching, we'll see you shortly at the next session. Bye all.